This is Tony Lobianco, and I'm the project director for the Kentucky Post-School Outcomes Center. And thank you all for joining us. I assume most of you are first-time interviewers, so I'm going to go over everything you will need to know, from how to do interviewers and why it's important, and how to access the system, how to create an account, and what to do if you don't think your student list is correct, and any other questions that you might have. So I'm going to take over as presenter and put up a slideshow. All right, you should be seeing the Kentucky Youth 1 Year Out interviewer training. Okay, I think I already talked about what some of the anticipated outcomes were for today. We're going to talk about why and how we collect the data that we're collecting, how to actually go about interviewing the former students. I'm going to frequently just abbreviate them as FS, so if you're wondering what FS stands for, that's former students. The importance of your role as an interviewer in collecting data, what to do if a former student needs help. We are dealing with people with disabilities, sometimes speech and language impairments as well, so what do we do in those kind of cases? How to assist former students that might need additional information, and how to access the data collection system, which will be a pretty big part, because I'm going to walk you through that and actually show you what a full interview would look like at the end of this. All right, so the why and how of Kentucky post-school outcome data collection. First of all, we do it because it is a federal requirement. That's not the only reason we do it, but we are mandated. The Kentucky Department of Education is mandated to report to the Office of Special Education Programs every year on the percent of youth who are no longer in school, had IEPs in effect at the time they left school, and were, as you can see there, I'm not going to read that entire definition, but those three things. We are the contractor. KyPSO is the contractor at HDI at UK to collect and report on this information. What do I mean when I say all youth who exit with an IEP? One of the biggest questions that we often have is, who should we be interviewing? Who should we not be interviewing? Who should be in my population and who should not be? We do our best to identify that population for you. When we started doing the yo-yo about 7 or 8 years ago, we said to school districts, it's up to you. Figure out who had an IEP and exited school last year by any of these categories, by graduating with a diploma or an alternate diploma, by aging out or dropping out. And we found that there was a lot of ambiguity there. There was a lot of differentiation in how districts identified those students. Some of them did a great job, some of them did not such a great job, some of them just really weren't sure what to do. So we work with KDE to identify the population of special education exit status, I believe is what we go by, and look at all those students that graduated with a diploma, graduated with an alternate diploma, aged out or dropped out of the system during this would be the 2014-15 school year. That's why it's the 1 year out, because this is 2016. So we're looking at those that left the previous year. That raises a few questions. I mean, what if they dropped out in the first week of the 2014-15 school year, which would be like, September of 2014? Well, yes, I realize it's, technically closer to 2 years out at that point. But if they dropped out during that school year, it's not a calendar year, it's a school year, then they would be included in this population. Now, we don't always get the population exactly right. Like I say, we work with KDE to do the best that we can to identify these students, but inevitably there are going to be some students that are probably there that shouldn't be, and some students that aren't there that should be. I think you know what I mean, even if I said that backwards. And we'll talk about how to deal with those situations. But I think 90 to 95% of them are going to be right. When we collect these data, it's going to help us answer some questions. We don't just do it because it's a federal requirement. I wouldn't want you to think, we're just doing busy work to make the federal government happy. We're doing this because it's important, and it's going to help us answer questions like, what helps students be successful? Did school help? And how did school help? And if they weren't successful, what could we do? What could the school do? What could the district do? What could the community do differently or better to help them be successful in their adult life? What kind of supports do young adults need most after high school? Are we throwing them out into the wild, or are they reporting back to us? It would really help if I knew a little bit more about some agencies in my area. And what changes are needed to better support students, families, schools, and agencies. All those kinds of things are what I think of as the main reason that we're doing this. And I hope that these things come through in our reports. They may come through as you're doing the interview. I think some of our interviewers have had really positive experiences just being interviewers, because I think we all got into this profession because we cared about kids. We wanted to make their lives better. I'm doing so through the data side. You guys are doing it through hands-on talking to former students, and you hear stories and you find ways that you may directly be able to impact the life of a former student. What kind of data are collected about former students' lives post-high school? The two big ones are employment and enrollment in post-secondary education. So those are the two that the feds require. Those are the two that we ask the most questions about, and those are generally the two that we think of in terms of the best ways to measure success. But we also ask about leisure activities, we ask about quality of life, we ask about what kind of services and supports that they're receiving or are needed. So how are these data collected? Well, they're collected through the yo-yo. That's why we're all here. The Youth 1 Year Out Former Student Interview. It's a computer-assisted telephone interview. So what that means is that you as an interviewer will need a computer, and once you log in online, as I'll show you how to do, it will tell you what questions to ask, right? And you'll record them through that site as well. Who collects the data? Every LEA. Every year on every student with an IEP who exited school 1 year earlier. When we started this out, as I said, 6 or 7 years ago, we only did a sample of districts. Some districts still, for some reason, think that we're doing a sample, but we're not. Every LEA has to do it every year. And we did that because you're the ones that are going to make a difference. The LEAs are the ones that really need this information. You need it at the district level if you're going to do anything with it. Having a report once every 6 years isn't really going to give you the kind of information that I think you need to make programmatic changes in transition planning. And also, you guys get better at interviewing, right? You get better at your skills of interviewing students, of finding out what they need, how you can help them, those kinds of things. We had districts come to us and say, can we do this even though we're not in the sample? And that's one of the reasons we decided that everybody should be doing it every year. So as I said, in the spring of 2016, which is here, we're following up with students who exited school at the end or any time during the 2014-15 school year. A lot of people will say, so these are the 2015 graduates. This is the senior follow-up for the 2015 seniors, the graduates. Well, that's partially true. That might be the bulk of the population, but like I said, it includes dropouts. They could have dropped out when they weren't seniors, so it's not just seniors. It's not just graduates. It might be someone that came back and reached maximum age and left because of that reason. So I would caution you to not just think of it as the 2015 graduation follow-up survey, because there's other ways that people can leave. What happens after the data are collected? Well, we get it. It comes directly to us as soon as an interview is entered, as soon as an interview is started. I can tell. It comes in a big database, and we compile reports after we get it. It takes a little while to clean it, um, to get it into the categories that we need it to be in, and those kinds of things, and to correct any mistakes, and then get it down to the LEA level. We make reports for KDE, for LEAs, for co-ops, and we routinely do presentations and reports as needed for parents or other stakeholders. Let's talk about your role as an interviewer. It's a big responsibility. You're collecting data that tells us about post-school outcomes of former students with disabilities across Kentucky. I mean, you're where we get the information. We've done our best to create a good instrument, but you're the ones on the ground that are collecting that information. That information is going to be used for really important things, as I said, for federal requirements, for state decision making, for your district decision making. People are going to hear about these data. They're not going to hear about individual level data. We're really cognizant of the need for privacy and confidentiality, so we're not going to say what what John Smith did, but we will tell a lot of people about aggregate data, such as, what are students with disabilities doing in different regions, in different districts with different types of disabilities? What are differences racially? What are differences based on gender? What are differences based on manner of exit? These kinds of things. And some important decisions are going to be made based on those reports. I hope important decisions are being made on them. That's one of the main reasons for doing it. That information that you obtain can help future students be more successful after high school. It might even help the very student you're talking with. As I said in the past, sometimes interviewers love being interviewers, and they'll get a former student on the line, and that former student will say something like, I really wish I had a job, but I just don't. I don't know how to get one. The interviewer may know how to hook them up with someone. It's not going to change the outcome of the interview, but that's not nearly as important as changing the outcome of a young person's life. And you may be in that role. And remember, too, that you might actually be the last person from the school to ever speak with this former student. Again, they're out of the school system now. So you may be the last contact. You're a representative of your school, of your district. And it'd be nice to leave on a good note, and to let them know that the school district still cares about them and what they're doing and what's happening. Protecting confidentiality. So we take confidentiality pretty seriously, really seriously. You're going to be accessing a lot of personal information about students. Some of it you're going to be accessing because I'm going to be giving it to you. You're going to get the names and the disability categories and things like that. Some of that may be confidential information that students wouldn't want shared with others, but you are also collecting information that may be even more of a confidentiality issue. People may share personal things. Don't share them. Don't leave them lying around, those kinds of things. So youth are protected by ensuring that all personal information about them is confidential. You will tell them that when you interview them. Make sure, as you have paper and electronic information containing information, don't make it available to anyone outside of school personnel with designated access. This sounds kind of obvious, but we all can envision scenarios where you've got a list of students and you've got notes about those students. You got a note, John Smith couldn't answer the phone right now because he's at the doctor getting a very serious rash looked at. And you leave that paper sitting on your desk and someone says, hey, do you want to go out to lunch? And you say, sure, I want to go out to lunch. And there's a paper on your desk with personal information that anybody can walk in your office and see. Be aware that those kinds of things happen. That's That's not good when it happen. Oops, sorry. Um, so don't leave yo-yo materials in a public place. You know, log out of your accounts when you're done, and just be aware of kind of paper um, issues. Don't allow unauthorized persons to look at them. Notify your supervisor. That'll vary district to district as to who that is if you lose any confidential information. And don't talk about who you interviewed or what they say. I know a lot of us live in small communities, and it's tempting to say, hey, did you hear about Billy? Well, don't say, hey, did you hear about Billy? At least if you do, have the information from something other than the yo-yo, because you're telling them when you call them that you're not going to do this kind of stuff. So respect that and respect them. We really think there's two purposes for the interview. The main one is to collect post-school outcome information, but the second is that you can provide information about post-school supports to former students who may need this information. I've already given a few examples of that. I'll do so again as we go through the interview. All right, let's talk about actually interviewing former students. So it's a good way to get the response rate up if you inform former students of the fact that you're going to be contacting them about 2 weeks before you plan to start contacting them. How do you do this? We have a draft letter that I will show you where it is at on our website. It's under resources, but I'll show it to you. Send them a letter about 2 weeks before you're going to interview them. Hey, let's do the math. Today is March 15th. 2 weeks is going to be March 29th. 3 days after that, it's going to be April 1st. That might be when you start interviewing students. So this is a really good time to do that. You might say, well, how do I get the information to know where to send such a letter? That's a great question. Work with your Infinite Campus person. Work with your registrar. I don't think it should be too difficult, particularly if you have the dose on your side, and I hope they all are, to be able to get information to contact that former student. We have contact information on the yo-yo instrument. We actually, I spoke too soon, we don't have it there yet. We are working on getting it there, but it won't be home addresses anyway. It'll be telephone numbers and in some cases email addresses. Because that's how you're going to do the interview. But if you send a letter out to former students, you'll need to find that information yourself. And frankly, you're in the best position if you can work with someone in your district to get the best contact information for everything anyway, because we're at the mercy of what Infinite Campus has and what KDE can get us. You guys on the ground in the district, you have access to better contact information than I think we will ever have. So use that to send the letter out. Our response rate last year was about 58%. And, you know, that's been pretty consistent over the years, but we'd love to get it higher. I know there's research done to show that if you send a letter ahead of time, letting them know that you're going to be calling, that can increase the likelihood of getting a positive response. What are you going to need when you do an interview? You're going to need a computer with internet access, a telephone, because you're doing it over the phone with speakerphone capability. Speakerphone, you can do this a couple of different ways. I mean, you can wear a headset if you've got that option. I mean, you can try to juggle a regular phone, but a speakerphone is probably your best bet because you're going to be typing all the time and you might be looking at notes. You need about 15 minutes per interview. It might take a little bit longer. It might not take as long. And of course, a quiet area is free of distraction as possible. You know, you don't want to be interviewing people over a speakerphone where people down the hall can hear you. You might even want to post a sign on the door that says, "Hey, interview in progress. Keep it quiet." Former student participation is voluntary. They can say no. Typically, about 3 to 5% of former students actually say no. So it's not terribly common, but it does happen. It's not voluntary. I don't want people to see this and say, like, oh, it's voluntary whether I interview them or not. No, it's not voluntary on your end. It's voluntary on their end. They can refuse the entire interview. They can refuse any question in the interview. And if that's the case, you know, don't be mean to them. Just say, you know, thank you for your time and hang up. How many times should you try to contact former students? We all know when we make telephone calls to people, we don't get a hold of them all the time, right? So we say try 3 times, right? Now, I mean, use your use your common sense here. I mean, I don't expect you to call a telephone number that's out of service 3 times just so you can like meet our criteria of calling 3 times. If it's out of service, you have no other way to getting a hold of them. There's a place to make a note of that and move on. On the flip side, if you try 3 times, on the third time they say, hey, I could talk to you later, well, call them a fourth time. Do what you can do to try to get an interview. I don't want you to badger people to death, but, make a good faith effort to try to get them. And our benchmark for that good faith effort is to try 3 times. Start using the contact information provided by the Yo-Yo interview or other information that you have. If you can't reach them by that, you can try cell phone number, you can try an email address. Again, you can't really do the interview through email. Some people have asked, it is an electronic interview, why can't we do it through email? Unfortunately, there's a lot of reasons why we can't. The biggest probably being that we haven't figured out a really good way to link individual interviews so that you're sending out a link to a specific person that will be able to be linked to their demographic information. I know that's kind of a confusing explanation, but there's just not a good way to do that yet. But you can email them and say, hey, are you available to talk sometime? Give me a time when you can talk on the phone, and I'll call you then. Of course, when the call can be an issue. This is kind of common sense stuff. If you call at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to get a good interview. So try calling when people are home. 5:30 to 9, probably the best time. Try on the weekends. But people work, people do different things. So use your own good judgment to try to find a time to call. Unfortunately, those times are often times that you are not at work, right? I mean, this is part of your job, but you will need to find a way to work out with your DOS, your supervisor, whoever it is, how you want to schedule this. A lot of people have told me that they just say, well, do it in the evening, we'll reimburse you somehow, or you can take some time off during the day, and then make those hours up when you're doing interviews in the evening or on the weekend. I'm not really sure how everybody works that out, but I know everybody finds a way. So work with your DOS. I'll be happy to talk with them if you need me to. And, and it's fine if you make some calls during the workday as well. Try to call when you're not likely to be interrupted, and, give yourself 20 minutes for an interview. We think they should only take about 15, but you never know when they're going to go over. If you get an answering machine, here's a script you can use. I'm not going to read it to you. You don't have to say it verbatim or anything, but we thought we'd give an example of what you can say. This PowerPoint's going to be on our website, and it's actually already on our website, so you can use this. If there's no answer, try different numbers. Like I said, you can try to email somebody. You may know them. You may know their family members. You can say, hey, I need to talk to Joe. Got any ideas? Maybe they have a sibling that's in school that you can ask. You can meet them somewhere if you've got a laptop that has internet access. We say it's a telephone interview, but there's no reason why you can't take a laptop to Starbucks, have a cup of coffee with them and go through the interview that way too. Some folks aren't going to have telephones, so this is just what I was saying. You can use a laptop. You can do it at their home. You can do it in the community, wherever you have internet access. You can ask them to come into the school. I've heard that people do this, and it works out sometimes. You can send a local or toll-free number to use to call in when they are at a place with the phone, and give them some days and times to call. Maybe where they're at. Maybe they're in a day programming event or something like that. You can try to contact them there. You can check and see if it's okay to show up there and interview them during a lunch break or doing whatever else they may be doing. They may have time to be interviewed then. What if they just can't be located? This happens. I said we had a 58% response rate. Um, the number one reason that people don't respond, like I said, about 3 to 5% just refuse, but that still leaves us 37%. And that's usually because they can't be located or contacted, or they just don't return the call, something like that. So, maybe that they move, they may not have a telephone, they may just not want to talk to you. If there's a place to note that on the interview, do that and move on. We understand it's going to happen. In saying that, I should note that I have seen districts that I really don't believe do that accurately. We need every district to make an attempt on everybody. And when I see 100 attempts come in a single day, and they all say could not contact, it kind of tips me off to the fact that they're really not trying to contact all those students, right? They just wanted to make sure that it looked like they tried to contact everybody. So, we're all trusting that you're doing a good job there. We know it's not always going to work, but do your best. I talked about using a speakerphone before. Make sure you let them know if you're on speakerphone and you've got the door closed and it's confidential and the person down the hall isn't listening in. That's kind of ask them if it's okay to put them on speakerphone and that the interview can't be overheard. What can you say to encourage participation? Again, make sure that they know that the survey is voluntary on their end. That they can refuse to answer any question that they don't feel comfortable answering or that they just don't want to answer. Make sure they know that the survey is important to their school district and their state. Their responses might help future students. Make sure they know that what they say is protected. It's going to be kept private and confidential. I can go over that in more depth if you need me to. We store it on secure servers, those kinds of things. Their name is not going to appear in any report. The responses are going to be combined and with other surveys. We'll present aggregate results, but there's no way that anyone is going to find out what John Smith is doing. They may find out what Pleasantville Independent District is doing, but they're not going to find out individual kind of stuff. And inform them that they can have someone help them answer questions if they feel as though they need to. Which raises the question, okay, if you can't interview the former student, can you interview someone else? First of all, try to interview the former student whenever possible. A lot of times, a parent will answer the phone and say, oh, I can tell you anything you need to know about John. Well, we'd rather talk to John, is what I would say in that case. However, there are going to be times where, either John is not available, he's, constantly at work, you can't get a hold of him, whatever. John's disability is such that it makes it really difficult to communicate with him over the phone, something like that. Okay, then it's okay to interview someone else, usually a parent or a guardian. Sometimes, a grandparent, a sibling, or something like that. We'd rather have an interview than not have an interview. So go ahead and do that. It happens about a third of the time. And I think that's probably all I need to say about that. If it is an issue where the former student is available but just doesn't really feel comfortable talking themselves, at least try to get from them who they want to speak for them. Say if they can say or indicate in some way, I really feel most comfortable with my mother being the one that speaks for me because my dad always misinterprets everything I say, then go with their wishes on that. But please do note this last part. It is not the parent or guardian's opinion that we want, and it is the parent guardian's understanding of the former student's opinion that we want. It can be a difficult thing to understand. I always think about it in terms of how my parents would have responded to how my life was going a year after I was out of high school, because they knew I thought I was doing well. But if you would have asked my dad what he thought of how my life was going a year after high school, he probably would have said, oh, it's terrible. he's having an awful time. I don't know why he's pursuing this ridiculous degree. He's having a terrible time, and he, hates his life, whatever. Um, but if you would have said, how do you think Tony feels about how things are going? He would probably have said, I think he's nuts, but I think he thinks he's doing well. Well, that's what we want. um, because we want to try to place the emphasis on what the former student would answer whenever possible. And usually we achieve that by actually talking to the former student. But when we can't, their proxy should not be speaking for themselves. They should be speaking for the former student. Someone answers the phone, expect that they think, well, it says that you're trying to sell them something. They may expect that you're trying to influence their vote in one way. I'm getting tired of all the political calls already. It always happens. The phone rings off the hook. I answer the phone in bizarre ways. So, quickly tell them who you are and why you're calling and the importance of it. Be friendly. They will know that you're not a robocall, I'm sure. So that'll help you out. But be aware that, when you call, people aren't always that receptive. Assisting former students who may need help to participate. So again, this speaks to the importance of looking over student information before you make the call, right? We're going to post what the student's disability is on the instrument, so you will see that. You'll see if they have a speech language impairment. You'll see if they have autism. You'll see if they have a functional mental disability. Those kind of things may clue you in, like, oh, yeah, okay, I might need to really think about how I'm going to word these questions. I may need to give myself a little more time. You might look through their IEP. How did they communicate when they were in school? I mean, a lot of you are probably teachers. A lot of you were probably teachers of these students, right? So rather than just kind of calling blind and assuming everyone's going to communicate in the same way, think about how this was done during high school. Think about how you can do it over the phone. If you know that they were eligible for the alternate assessment, that might be a further clue that they might need a little more assistance in completing an interview. Note, only certain school personnel have access to student IEPs, so make sure that your DOS knows that you may need information from former students and their IEPs in order to conduct the yo-yo. I think this is really important. I am happy to talk to your DOS. I will be sending them periodic things. One of those messages that I will send them will make clear, if I haven't already, just that interviewers really benefit from having this information. So you remind them of that too. I talked about accommodating former students who might need some accommodations to participate. I think this is kind of common sense stuff. Go slowly. You may ask a question that someone, finds offensive, is hurt by. They may really want to have a job. And when you say, are you currently employed? Hey, that can be a tough question to answer. They may have done everything they wanted to do. They may have dreams. They may have thought they were getting a job and didn't get it. Do the best you can to be understanding there, but make sure that you do record their responses accurately. Be sensitive and listen to them. I think that's what I was just talking about. And of course, if it gets to the point where they're really broken up by the interview, I don't think this happens very often. But if it does, the interview itself is not worth causing a traumatic event in somebody's life. Just say, I'll stop the interview now. If you want to talk, I'm certainly available to do so, but we don't need to keep doing this. Like I say, the person you're interviewing is more important than the interview itself. So be sensitive to them, listen to them and their needs, and be aware that some questions may be troubling. Same thing for parents. I mean, it may be more difficult for a parent to have to say that their son or daughter isn't doing what they had so much hope that they would. Um, Explain that the survey questions are asked of everyone. You're not being singled out. It's not like we're, trying to pin down Larry to find out how he's doing. No, these are standard questions asked of everybody in the state that left with an IEP, and they're, what's going on with their son or daughter um, is important and valued. Uh, it's important to be accurate and consistent. We hope you have a conversational tone. I hate it when someone calls me and wants to do a survey over the phone and reads verbatim as though they're a robot. And do you want to choose a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5? And oh God, I just hang up the phone at that point usually. We have written out in the interview a script. That is a guideline. Use your conversational tone. It's important to have, this to be a conversation with former students. You might need to rephrase questions just to help them understand too. We've tried to use language that we think will be understood by everybody, but some people aren't going to understand everything. So, I mean, the example that we have here, are you working now? Maybe they don't understand what that means. There's neutral ways to rephrase it, and there's non-neutral ways to rephrase it. If you say, you still got that job down at the hardware store, don't you? That's not a neutral rephrasing. That's prompting them to say yes. You could say, do you have a job now? That's neutral. That's not leading them. You don't want to ask them, hey, I heard from numerous people that you're going to college. How's that going for you? No, that's leading them into an answer, and we want their unbiased and objective answers. But rephrase questions in ways that they will understand them. What if they do misunderstand a question or the responses that you might read to them? So you can use probes. Can you be a little more specific? You can say, I'm not entirely clear about what you mean. Could you explain it a little more? You can read these. I'm not going to read these one by one here, but be aware that there are those probes. There's also at the end of the interview an opportunity for you as an interview to give us direct feedback and say, I really am not sure that the former student understood what was being asked in a lot of these questions. That's okay, but I mean, you write down what they say, whether you believe it or not. I rely on political surveys all the time. I think I responded to someone saying that I was a 80-year-old woman a couple of weeks ago, just because I wanted to mess with the political survey taker. But if that's what they say, hey, write it down. But you'll have a lot more credibility than the person that called me, and I told them that. How to assist former students who may need post-school support information. As I said before, this may be the school district's last opportunity to assist the former student. So you're not just collecting post-school outcome data. You can connect former student with needed supports. The interview might be the last time the LEA has contact with the former student, and you have notes and resources in the interview that you may share with the former student. We have a resource manual that is linked to the interview. Every page of the interview says this is where you might look on the resource manual to get more information about this. So if they're asking about housing, hey, pull up the resource manual, give them some information that we have. It's HDI's, as a Human Development Institute's manual. We're coming out with a new one. This will probably be the last year that we use this one, and it'll just get better and better, but it's still a really good resource. And there's other supports too. I talked about the Disability Resource Manual. We put together a supplemental resource manual that we thought might be a step towards making it more district specific in some areas, so you can see that on our website. That's not directly linked, but it does have good information. Transitiononestop.org is a website that can help. And we always tell people that the default is the transition consultant at the co-op. I know they're not special ed co-ops anymore, but there's a special ed branch of the co-op, of course. So I always tell interviews, hey, if you don't know where to send somebody, but it seems like they need some support, contact that person. And we include their name and contact information directly in the interview. I'll show you where that is. The Disability Resource Manual, I already talked about a little bit. It's it's a great manual for not just this, but for a lot of things. I know Judy passes these out at transition fairs frequently, and they're a big hit. I think people come just to get those sometimes. So I think it's an easy to read, well, resource manual. I guess that's why it's called the resource manual. How to use it, like I said, it's linked to the interview. You will have to allow pop-ups because it'll show up as a pop-up. And I'd recommend just minimizing it and referring to it when you need it. I've already talked about the other things on that. The supplemental resource manual, it's under resources on our website. It's a good thing to look at. It's not directly linked, but it's there and you can use it. Transition One Stop. Hey, it's a good website. And I've talked about the transition consultants. I think you guys know that you're located within an educational cooperative region. There's 9 of them throughout the state. And they can be a tremendous resource for helping young people find supports when they need them. And that's just what I already said. If you need technical assistance as you're doing your yo-yos, if you come across things you don't understand or you want to know more about, Judy and I are the people to contact. We have other people on our staff too. Dana Manning does a lot of our analysis and works on the reports quite a bit. Barry Whaley is going to be working with districts to go over their data when they need, and he'll be presenting at some of the co-ops, so you'll probably meet him at some point. But as far as actual technical assistance on yo-yo matters, contact Judy or myself, and we'll, between the two of us, we'll get things straightened out. And I will talk more about what that might look like in a second. Okay, you should see my web browser now, and I opened it to KyPSO.org. So this will kind of be your home base for everything. I'll show you a couple things before I show you the actual interview itself. You can see all of these tabs here. If you click on resources, you'll see the example of the letter to send to former students in preparation for the yo-yo. You can click on that. It opens as a Word document. You can modify it as you need. Like I say, I recommend sending that out 2 weeks before you try to make the call, which is probably pretty soon. Right below that, I have a copy of fields to add students. This is something some of you might need to do. What you will do, or why you would need to do this, you will see a list of your students. And you may say, there's other students that meet the criteria for having a yo-yo done on them, and they're not on our list. So the way to let us know about that is not to just email me and say, John Smith, who has a functional mental disability, needs to be added. Why not? A, because that doesn't give me enough information, and B, because you have just violated his confidentiality by doing that. Sending emails that contain personally identifiable information is not a good idea. So what we ask you to do is to use this Excel spreadsheet. Basically, if I were to click this and open this, it would open an Excel spreadsheet. It would have all the fields that I need. It would have SSID, first name, last name, disability category, gender, ethnicity, all the things that we already have for most students. And you would save that as a document or spreadsheet on your desktop or wherever you want to save it on your computer. And then I'm going to go back over to home. You would go down here to where it says secure link, where it says send student IDs, disability type, ethnicity, manner of exit, gender, and school by uploading the information here. Secure link. Okay, so that's a lot more secure than email. What you do, it's actually a Qualtrics survey, but it allows you to upload a document. If you upload that document, I will add any of the students that you tell me to, provided that they're not already assigned to a different district. In that case, I might have to check with KDE and find out which district they really belong to. The opposite of that is if you have students on your list that shouldn't be there. We try to make sure this doesn't happen, but sometimes it does. Someone even called me yesterday and said, I've got a bunch of students that shouldn't be there. And the reason, really the most common reason for that is if they have, if they were on the alternate diploma track and they received an alternate diploma when they were 18, they went through with their cohort. They walked at graduation, so to speak. But then they came back. If they come back the next year, if they re-enroll, I'm not entirely sure what their status is there. Maybe I think it's called a grade 14 or something like that. But they're entitled to services until they're 21. If they've done that, then we can take them out of the yo-yo population. What I would need you to do in that case is to take an Infinite Campus screenshot, pull up their record, and show me that they're enrolled, make sure it has their name and student ID number, and send that through the secure link. Definitely do not send that through email. I mean, a lot of times they even have pictures on them. I don't care if it has a picture of the student on it or not, but it will have obviously personally identifiable information that they would probably want to keep confidential. I would feel awful if something like that got hacked through an email server. So send it through our secure link. We'll get it. I will need to, I'm not exactly sure how it'll happen, if I'll need to verify with KDE to take them off, or if they will say, under these circumstances, just remove them. I won't remove them until April 1st when the yo-yo goes live. Right now, student names are up there. You can see them. You can let me know. I hope you do go over them and see if your student list is correct, have someone verify that. But I'm not going to take them off until April 1st because that's when it goes live, and databases change and things like that. So they'll still be there for a few weeks, but it's good to let me know. Okay. I'm going to get into data collection, show you the instrument and how to register for it. Okay, so when you click data collection, you're going to see a screen that looks like that. If you don't have an account, this is where you make one. You can click here to register for your account. I'm not going to go through all this. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but we can just go through and do it. There are 3 things that need to happen, however, for your account to become active, for you to be able to do interviews. A, you've got to have an account. If you don't have an account, you can't do it. Everything's accessed through your account. The second thing that has to happen is that your DOS needs to tell us that they want you to have an active account and who they want you to have access to interview. The default is everyone in your district. However, some districts, particularly larger districts, like to divide it up among schools. I don't recommend that smaller districts do this. If you're in a small district, sometimes there are alternative schools or something. Maybe there's, I can't think of a particular district that has this off the top of my head, but let's just pick on Christian County. I don't know. Let's say that 99% of students in Christian County go to either Christian County High School or Hopkinsville High School. But there's like one student that goes to the Christian County Alternative Day Treatment Center or something like that. And all of your interviewers are assigned either to Christian County High School or to Hopkinsville High School, and that other student gets missed because no one signed up for them. So I always recommend the doses. You guys as interviewers should have this information too, because you should pass it on to your doses. You're sometimes the go-between between myself and your doses. If everyone is assigned to a specific school and nobody has district-wide access, it is very easy to miss those students. You won't even see them if you only have school-level access. So, be aware of that. Okay, I'm going to log into my account the same way Oops. You guys will after you have an account. And I got my password wrong. Actually, I got my username wrong. If that happens, if you get your username wrong, you can email Judy. If you get your password wrong, you can reset it by clicking I forgot my password. All right. This is what your page will look like. These are all fake students, so I'm not violating anybody's confidentiality right now. You will see, um, you can go back to the KyPSO home here. You can, well, this is actually last year's training module, so don't look at that. We'll put this year's on pretty soon. Take the quiz. You will need to take the quiz. That's the third thing you need to do. I only mentioned two of the three things you need to do. You need to create an account. You need your DOS to tell us that they want you to be an interviewer and what schools or district they want you to be an interviewer for. And you need to pass the quiz. If you're a first-time interviewer, which I assume most of you are, yeah, you need to do the quiz. If you're just doing this as a brush up and you did it last year, you don't need to take the quiz. You're already good. But that is the third criteria that you will need to pass in order to have access to interviews. If you need to change your profile at some point, you can do that. If you need to change your password, of course you can do that. It tells you what district you're assigned to up here. This is a test district, HDI test. You'll see this, notice right here, saying it's a test version. Right now, this is just, it's a test. We put it up there for two reasons. One, so you can practice all you want. You can familiarize yourself with the interview instrument. I think that's good to do because it's not always the same, right? We ask different questions based on answers. If a former student says that they are not employed, they get different follow-up questions than they would if they said that they were employed. If they dropped out, they get different questions. They get different questions based on whether they said that they're going on to higher education or not. So there's multiple ways that this interview can look. It's not going to look the same all the time. So I recommend going through and testing out a few interviews. The second reason we put this up is so that you can look at your list of students and see, verify that they're correct. I hope they are. It's not terribly difficult to change them, but it's not as easy as having it right the first time, of course. So if you see that it's wrong, if your DOS sees that it's wrong, contact me the ways I just said. Send me that spreadsheet through the secure server of the students that need to be added. Send me Infinite Campus screenshots of students that shouldn't be there. Tell me why they shouldn't be there. If they need to be added, I'll add them with no questions asked. We'll figure it out later. If they need to be deleted, I need to be a little more scrutinous about that because we are a contractor for this federal requirement. I can't just automatically delete students unless I have a really good reason. So that might take a little bit longer. But look at the list, see what you think. All right, on to the interview. You can see my fake students are some of our good friends from the Breakfast Club and Ferris Bueller's Day Off and a few other folks that I just thought would be fun to interview. So I don't know, who should I interview here? Oh, why don't I interview, I'll interview Sloan Peterson, Ferris Bueller's girlfriend. Okay, so I open this. What do I see? A bunch of information. The district, of course, the student ID number. I'll see your name. I'll see your disability category. Remember, that might clue me into how I need to phrase questions in some cases. Gender or ethnicity. I'll see how she exited. So if it says dropout, I know there's going to be different questions about that. It'll tell me the school. But like I say, talk to your registrar, talk to your Infinite Campus person. They're going to have better information anyway. We just do this because we were trying to do anything we could possibly do to help you connect with former students. Another thing you'll see right here, resource manual. So we talked about what that was. I'm going to click it. What's this pop-up blocked? Yeah, we talked about that. You need to make sure that your pop-up blocker is off. I can click right there and I'll say always allow pop-ups from KyPSO.org because, hey, you can trust us. I'll do that. Then I'll click resource manual again. There's the resource manual. It shows up as a PDF. I'm not going to go through that whole thing right now. We can maximize it, but what I would do is minimize it, keep it at the bottom, then it's down at the bottom of your screen somewhere. You can refer to it as you go through the interview. I probably won't even do that, but I wanted to show you that it was a possibility to do. Let's start the interview. Okay. Up here you can record what happened when you make the phone call, right? We've got interview instructions down there. We talk about things that I think I've already talked about. We also have a script that you can use. So you would say, hello, my name is Tony Lobianco, and I'm a guidance counselor at Sloan Peterson's High School. I want to find out how our students that left high school last year are doing right now, and you can make this conversational, but you do need to make sure that you include references to that last sentence. You can skip any question that you don't want to answer, and doing this interview will not affect your benefits, including SSI. Some former students don't do that. They think if they answer any question to anybody, they're putting themselves in jeopardy. No, we do not report this information to any organization that's going to impact benefits. So make sure they know that it's voluntary and that it will not affect benefits. Now let's say I call Sloan and she's not at home. I can make a note of that up here. I can say tried 3:15, no answer. Why would I do that? Maybe because I want to remind myself of that. Maybe because my dose wants to know. Maybe because you want us to know that you're making efforts. I might save that. It tells me it's successfully saved, and I might go back to my user home. Then I can see Sloan Peterson, the status changed. It's not started for almost everybody else. Here I see it's open. Okay, but now I'm going to call again. So I open that up. I'm going to start interview again. I've got that note. I try again. I read the script, and I get a hold of Sloan. And she says, yeah, I'll be interviewed. I'd be happy to be interviewed. So I click yes. And then I click proceed. All right, so who was the person interviewed? Again, we want you to interview former students. And let's say this was a former student. But if it wasn't, if it was a parent or guardian, a pop-up question is going to show up. Say, why? Let us know why it wasn't possible to interview that former student. Just write it in there. But if I click former student, as I'm going to, you won't have to answer that. All right, where did you live for most of the year? You can go through these. I'm not going to read them one by one. There's a lot of choices. And again, I wouldn't necessarily start by reading all of the choices to the person that you're interviewing either. I would just say, where did you live most of last year? And maybe Sloan says, at my boyfriend's house. And I go down and I try to figure out what that might mean. And well, it's either with friends or with husband, wife, significant other. I would say, would you consider your boyfriend a significant other? She says, yeah, it's Ferris. Okay, yeah, I'll click yes. Okay, again, up here is where we have potential resources, right? So if Sloan says when I'm interviewing her, I would really like to not be living with my parents. They are driving me crazy. But I don't know how to get a house or an apartment on my own. Is there anything you can recommend? That's where I'd pull up the resource manual. I'd say, hey, resources for community living are on page 10. I'd go to that. I would relay that information to her. All right, I'm paranoid, so I'm going to click save. I don't get the little box every time that says successfully saved, but you can kind of tell it flickered there, so it's saved. I'm going to click next. All right, employment. From the time you left high school until now, have you ever had a paying job? Sloan, a responsible member of our society, will probably say yes, so I'm going to click next. Of course, you're asking her these questions. You're not just filling them in on your own. That would drive me completely bonkers if I found out that interviewers were just answering former student questions the way they thought former students would answer them. But I'm just doing this to illustrate the interview to you. Okay, so we have questions about that employment. Again, these questions wouldn't be asked if we said no, that she hadn't been employed. But since she has, we need to ask, since leaving high school, have you worked for a total of 90 days? Let's say she has. You worked for an average of 20 hours or more per week, half of a 40-hour week. Let's say no. She's working, part-time, not even 20 hours a week. Were you paid at least minimum wage? For your community. We added that this year because we know that a couple communities in Kentucky, minimum wage is higher than the national minimum wage. So I think last year we just said were you paid minimum wage and figured it's $7.25 for everybody. Now I should know, but I don't exactly what it is, and I think it's just Louisville and Lexington that have higher minimum wages. But if you're in one of those communities that has a higher minimum wage, make sure you know what it is and make sure you ask if they're making more than that. We ask about supports and accommodations that they received on their job. Job coach or an employment specialist, different than a personal aid or assistant, right? The job coach is someone who offers advice to improve performance. They're probably not there all the time. They probably, maybe for the first week they are, then they just kind of stop in and check on things, help them do better at that job. Personal aid or assistant, they're there for other reasons. They're there for personal care needs, not really work related just because they need someone there with them. So it's important to distinguish between that. Or do they have special equipment? Do they have a raised desk, a braille system, something like that, or other? You'll notice a lot of these have boxes for other. What we used to do is we used to say, other, please specify, and then we would have a box. And we realized that a lot of people were filling in that box, whether they clicked other or not. I was never entirely sure why they were doing that, although after reading them, sometimes people did just have comments that they wanted to make about that question. To be honest, those comments take a lot of time to go through, so I wouldn't do it unless it's something really relevant that you really want us to know for that particular question. But if you do click other, then yeah, tell us what they said. That would be interesting. Not just because it's going to help us make better reports, it'll help us refine the instrument in the future. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to say that they didn't say any of these. And Sloan doesn't need any of the following supports. You don't have to click something. You can leave that blank. Are you still working? I'll say yes, I am. Yes, she is. And on a 5-point scale from very interesting to not interesting at all, how interesting do you think your job is? Let's say Sloan said somewhat interesting. All right, now we move on to the education questions. Again, resource manual, giving us ideas for where you could point a student that has questions about this. The resource manual on page 23. Also consider your local community college. It tells us good information. Have you been in any type of school or training program? Let's say she says no. Okay. If you did not want to go, or I'm sorry, if you did not go on to post-secondary education, what is the reason? And you can check all that apply here. Again, had she said she went on to post-secondary ed, there will be a bunch of questions about that post-secondary education experience. Another reason to keep going through these and practicing them. You can practice as many as you want. They will all be erased by April 1st. So do whatever you want until then, except don't think you're actually doing full interviews before then because, like I say, they will be erased. But go through and practice and get accustomed to it. So she says, a bunch of things. You can read these if you need to. Like I said, that wouldn't be my first. My first thing would be just leaving an open-ended question, see how she answers, try to code things that seem like what she would have answered. You might ask for some clarification. If she's not forthcoming, then I'd go through and read them. Let's say she said something like, well, just I didn't feel like going to college. I had a decent job, hoped to advance in that, and I just didn't really want to, and plus, I got the job, and college was really expensive. So I checked 3 of these. I'd say she didn't want to. She found the job, and it was too expensive. So I do that. Hey, maybe she says, and also, you know what? There's no good colleges around here. Well, I click other, right in the box. Something like that. Click next. What do you do on most days? Open-ended question, big box, lots of room to write whatever the person you're interviewing is saying. Then we ask some community participation questions. We ask, do you have a driver's license? I'll say yes for Sloan. We ask if you're registered to vote. We'll say yes. That may be one that they refuse to answer. That's okay. You can mark it right there. Please name the most important thing during high school that helped you in your life right now. A lot of people mention programs and classes and agencies. I would prefer that people don't mention particular names. A, we don't know who they are. And I guess it doesn't really violate any confidentiality at that point. But it doesn't do us a whole lot of good if you say, well, Mr. Smith. I mean, I don't know who Mr. Smith is. But if you, I mean, you could say Mr. Smith, the science teacher. That, that tells me something. That, a general ed teacher, a science teacher. That's helpful. And then they can put things outside of high school. It says during high school, not necessarily in high school. So maybe the thing that helped them the most in high school was their youth group in church or in the community or something like that. So they can list whatever they want there. We code these. It does take a little bit longer because, it always takes longer to analyze text, but we do it. Since leaving high school, have you had any contact, phone, letter, or face-to-face, with a counselor from the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation? If there were people that did interviews in the past, this question has changed this year, so be aware of that. But we're just asking it this way this year, and I think it's a good question. Really, the main reason I think was because a lot of people didn't really understand what kind of help they were getting. They may have said that they did receive support from Voc Rehab and that they were getting a job coach. They didn't really realize how those two went together. So now we're just asking, did someone from Voc Rehab contact you, or did you have contact with them? And then say what kind of help you're getting. So, maybe something like that. Voc Rehab help find job. You can let us know how that question goes for you too, because like I say, it's the first year we've asked it this way. I like it better this way, but you guys you always do provide good feedback. All right, so we're just about done the interview. And say, that was the last question of the interview. Is there anything else you would like to add about how things have been going for you since you left high school? So this is kind of is there anything we missed that you want to talk about? At the end of every job interview, there's a question like that usually. And some people write a lot of different stuff. Some people say, hey, I loved high school. It was great. Some people say things that aren't so flattering. I think Judy had some comments up at the beginning of the webinar that were largely pulled from this question. Then we have, the thank you note, so to speak, and this is where the information for your regional transition consultant would be. It doesn't show up on this because it's linked to the district. And remember, my district is a fake district for this. But for your district, it should say the name and contact information of your transition consultant. So when you say, I can give you the name and phone number for your regional transition consultant, would you like that information? Of course, they can say no. Most of them probably do say no, but there it is. You can give it to them. And then 31, interviewers' comments. If you have something you want to say to us, if you say Sloan didn't really seem like she was being honest when she answered these questions. Or, Sloan's mother was in the background and she tailored her questions to what she thought her mother wanted to hear. Or I personally know that Sloan is going to college. She just doesn't want to admit it because, the college she's going to didn't make the NCAA tournament for reasons that we won't get into. Had to throw that in there. But, anything that you think is relevant that needs to be added, you can put in the interviewer's comments. I'm going to click next once more. Okay, then we ask what information was shared with the respondent. Again, this is a question for you, the interviewer. This is not a question that you are asking the former student, but we would like to keep track of what you told them. Did you give them information about the transition consultant? So let's say you did. And let's say you gave them information about supported employment as well, so you can check that. If you gave them some other kind of information, hey, you can check that too. Maybe you said, I don't know, you can say, you can envision what other responses would be there. All right, so that's the end of the interview. You click submit. What happens? You go back, Sloan Peterson should say submitted, and voila, it does. So, you know that one's done. So, as you're doing the interviews, again, the window is April 1st through June 30th. You can look at the status of all your students. You can see, who's submitted, who's not even started, who's in progress. Let me show you one more thing on this. Let's say I'm trying to interview Marty McFly, from Back to the Future. I start the interview. I can't get a hold of him. He's, time traveled. He's not there. I've tried. I try again. I'm not going to put notes in the box, but you get the impression. There's just no way that I can get a hold of this guy. So what do? I finally click could not contact. I don't do that on the first try, right? Because that's not really the outcome for this question. These are just my attempts to contact. But after I realize that, I don't even know what decade this guy's in because he's got a flying DeLorean, I'm not going to be able to contact him. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to, let's see what happens if I, just save it and then return home. It's going to say Marty McFly's status is open. And I occasionally get questions, why does it say open? I already clicked could not contact. That's all the information I have on this person. Well, the reason it says open is because you never click submit. Click submit. Marty McFly has then been submitted. It still is considered submitted if you can't conduct the interview, as long as you tell us, that you couldn't conduct, why you couldn't conduct the interview, that you couldn't contact them, that they refused, or if you, do conduct the interview and submit it at the end. That's all fine. A lot of districts, a lot of doses, I think rightfully want to make sure that they're getting 100% in attempting to interview everyone. Again, a response rate is not going to be 100%. It's usually, like I say, 58 to 60%. We'd love it to be higher. I hope it is this year. Districts do occasionally get in trouble with KDE if I have to report to them that they have not even tried to interview all of the students on their list. If it says in progress, a lot of times I give folks the benefit of the doubt because I assume that they tried and couldn't contact someone, but it would be a lot better if you just made sure you hit submit. All right, that is the interview. I'm going to log out. Please do log out when you're done doing interviews. A lot of you, I know, probably share computers with others. It tells us who interviewed who in our database in case there's any questions we can go back and ask. And I mean, you really shouldn't have access to other people's records. So if there's 3 people that are sharing a computer and you don't log out and you leave it open or something like that, or you close your browser window, that's when we really get into trouble. You close your browser window without logging out, then you pull KyPSO.org back up, you click data collection, and all of a sudden you've got a list of students, but it's not your list of students, and it's not logged in under your account. It's logged in under somebody else's account. So that's the value of logging out. All right, I think that is all I have, so I am going to stop presenting and take any questions that anyone has. Okay, well, I don't hear any questions, but I will put my phone on mute and just kind of hang out here for a few minutes in case someone does have a question. You are free to go. You, um, like I say, create an account if you don't have one yet. Make sure your dose has informed us that they want you to be an interviewer. Pass the quiz and take it from there.